Tonight, we drift into a quieter world where the immortal spirit of poetry rises from the ashes of a burning rose, where a vain shirt collar dreams of romance before being ironed, flat forever, where winter yields its throne to the joyful children of spring, where a northern swan's nest cradles the history of nations and song, and where a humble dandelion shares its quiet beauty with the blooming apple branch. So close your eyes and let the stories carry you far away into the quiet of the night. The story of the year. It was near the end of January, and a terrible fall of snow was pelting down and whirling through the streets and lanes. The windows were plastered with snow. On the outside, snow fell in masses from the roofs. Everyone seemed in a great hurry. They ran, they flew, fell into each other's arms, holding fast for a moment, as long as they could stand safely. Coaches and horses looked as if they had been frosted with sugar. The footmen stood with their backs against the carriages, so as to turn their faces from the wind. The foot passengers kept within the shelter of the carriages, which could only move slowly on in the deep snow. At last the storm abated, and a narrow path was swept clean in front of the houses. When two persons met in this path, they stood still, for neither liked to take the first step on one side into the deep snow to let the other pass him. There they stood, silent and motionless, till at last, as if by tacit consent, they each sacrificed a leg and buried it in the deep snow. Towards evening, the weather became calm. The sky cleared from the snow, looked more lofty and transparent, while the stars shone with new brightness and purity. The frozen snow crackled underfoot and was quite firm enough to bear the sparrows who hopped upon it in the morning dawn. They searched for food in the path which had been swept, but there was very little for them, and they were terribly cold. "Tweet, tweet," said one to another. "They call this a new year, but I think it is worse than the last. We might just as well have kept the old year. I'm quite unhappy, and I have a right to be so." Yes, you have. And yet the people ran about and fired off guns to usher in the new year, said a little shivering sparrow. They threw things against the doors and were quite beside themselves with joy because the old year had disappeared. I was glad too, for I expected we should have some warm days, but my hopes have come to nothing. It freezes harder than ever. I think mankind have made a mistake in reckoning time. That they have, said a third, an old sparrow with a white poll. They have something they call a calendar. It's an invention of their own, and everything must be arranged according to it. But it won't do. When spring comes, then the year begins. It is the voice of nature, and I reckon by that. But when will spring come? Asked the others. It will come when the stork returns, but he is very uncertain, and here in the town no one knows anything about it. In the country, they have more knowledge. Shall we fly away there and wait? We shall be nearer to spring then, certainly. That may be all very well, said another sparrow, who had been hopping about for a long time, chirping, but not saying anything of consequence. But I have found a few comforts here in town, which I'm afraid I should miss out in the country. Here in this neighborhood, there lives a family of people who have been so sensible as to place 3 or 4 flower pots against the wall in the courtyard, so that the openings are all turned inward, and the bottom of each points outward. In the latter, a hole has been cut large enough for me to fly in and out. I and my husband have built a nest in one of these pots, and all our young ones, who have now flown away, were brought up there. The people who live there, of course, made the whole arrangement that they might have the pleasure of seeing us, or they would not have done it. It pleased them also to strew breadcrumbs for us, and so we have food, and may consider ourselves provided for. So I think my husband and I will stay where we are, although we are not very happy, but we shall stay, and we will fly into the country, said the others, to see if spring is coming. And away they flew. In the country, it was really winter, a few degrees colder than in the town. The sharp winds blew over the snow-covered fields. The farmer, wrapped in warm clothing, sat in his sleigh and beat his arms across his chest to keep off the cold. The whip lay on his lap. The horses ran till they smoked. The snow crackled. The sparrows hopped about in the wheel ruts and shivered, crying, "Tweet, tweet, when will spring come? It is very long in coming." "Very long indeed," sounded over the field from the nearest snow-covered hill. It might have been the echo which people heard, or perhaps the words of that wonderful old man who sat high on a heap of snow, regardless of wind or weather. He was all in white. He had on a peasant's coarse white coat of frieze. I had long white hair, a pale face, and large, clear blue eyes. "Who is that old man?" asked the sparrows. "I know who he is," said an old raven, who sat on the fence and was condescending enough to acknowledge that we are all equal in the sight of heaven, even as little birds. And therefore he talked with the sparrows and gave them the information they wanted. "I know who the old man is," he said. "It is Winter, the old man of last year. He is not dead yet, as the calendar says, but acts as guardian to little Prince Spring, who is coming. Winter rules here still. Ugh, the cold makes you shiver. Little ones, does it not? "There did I not tell you so?" said the smallest of the sparrows. "The calendar is only an invention of man, and is not arranged according to nature. They should leave these things to us. We are created so much more clever than they are." 1 week passed, and then another. The forest looked dark. The hard frozen lake lay like a sheet of lead. The mountains had disappeared, for over the land hung damp, icy mists. Large black crows flew about in silence. It was as if slept. At length, a sunbeam glided over the lake, and it shone like burnished silver. But the snow on the fields and the hills did not glitter as before. The white form of winter sat there still, with his unwandering gaze fixed on the south. He did not perceive that the snowy carpet seemed to sink, as it were, into the earth. That here and there a little green patch of grass appeared, and that these patches were covered with sparrows. Tee-wit, tee-wit. Is spring coming at last? Spring. How the cry resounded over field and meadow, and through the dark brown woods, where the fresh green moss still gleamed on the trunks of the trees. And from the south came the 2 first storks flying through the air. And on the back of each sat a lovely little child, a boy and a girl. They greeted the earth with a kiss, and wherever they placed their feet, white flowers sprung up from beneath the snow. Hand in hand, they approached the old iceman. Winter embraced him and clung to his breast. And as they did so, in a moment, all 3 were enveloped in a thick, damp mist, dark and heavy, that closed over them like a veil. The wind arose with mighty rustling tone and cleared away the mist. Then the sun shone out warmly. Winter had vanished away, and the beautiful children of spring sat on the throne of the year. "This is really a new year," cried all the sparrows. "Now we shall get our rights and have some return for what we suffered in winter." Wherever the 2 children wandered, green buds burst forth on bush and tree. The grass grew higher, and the cornfields became lovely in delicate green. The little maiden strewed flowers in her path. She held her apron before her. It was full of flowers. It was as if they sprung into life there, for the more she scattered around her, the more flowers did her apron contain. Eagerly, she showered snowy blossoms over apple and peach trees, so that they stood in full beauty before even their green leaves had burst from the bud. Then the boy and the girl clapped their hands, and troops of birds came flying by no one knew from whence, and they all twittered and chirped, singing, "Spring has come." How beautiful everything was. Many an old dame came forth from her door into the sunshine and shuffled about with great delight, glancing at the golden flowers which glittered everywhere in the fields, as they used to do in her young days. The world grew young again to her, as she said, "It is a blessed time out here today." The forest already wore its dress of dark green buds. The thyme blossomed in fresh fragrance. Primroses and anemones sprung forth, and violets bloomed in the shade, while every blade of grass was full of strength and sap. Who could resist sitting down on such a beautiful carpet? And then the young children of spring seated themselves, holding each other's hands, and sang, and laughed, and grew. A gentle rain fell upon them from the sky, but they did not notice it, for the raindrops were their own tears of joy. They kissed each other and were betrothed. And in the same moment, the buds of the trees unfolded, and when the sun rose, the forest was green. Hand in hand, the two wandered beneath the fresh pendant canopy of foliage, while the sun's rays gleamed through the opening of the shade in changing and varied colors. The delicate young leaves filled the air with refreshing odor. Merrily rippled the clear brooks and rivulets between the green velvety rushes and over the many-colored pebbles beneath. All nature spoke of abundance and plenty. The cuckoo sang and the lark caroled, for it was now beautiful spring. The careful willows had, however, covered their blossoms with woolly gloves, and this carefulness is rather tedious. Days and weeks went by, and the heat increased. Warm air waved the corn as it grew golden in the sun. The white northern lily spread its large green leaves over the glossy mirror of the woodland lake, and the fishes sought the shadows beneath them. In a sheltered part of the wood, the sun shone upon the walls of a farmhouse, brightening the blooming roses and ripening the black, juicy berries, which hung on the loaded cherry trees with his hot beams. Here sat the lovely wife of summer, the same whom we have seen as a child and a bride. Her eyes were fixed on dark gathering clouds, which in wavy outlines of black and indigo were piling themselves up like mountains, higher and higher. They came from every side, always increasing, like a rising, rolling sea. Then they swooped towards the forest, where every sound had been silenced, as if by magic, every breath hushed, every bird mute. All nature stood still in grave suspense. But in the lanes and the highways, passengers on foot or in carriages were hurrying to find a place of shelter. Then came a flash of light, as if the sun had rushed forth from the sky, flaming, burning, all devouring, and darkness returned amid a rolling crash of thunder. The rain poured down in streams. Now there was darkness, then blinding light. Now thrilling silence, then deafening din. The young brown reeds on the moor waved to and fro in feathery billows. The forest boughs were hidden in a watery mist, and still light and darkness followed each other, still came the silence after the roar, while the corn and the blades of grass lay beaten down and swamped, so that it seemed impossible they could ever raise themselves again. But after a while, the rain began to fall. Gently, the sun's rays pierced the clouds, and the water drops glittered like pearls on leaf and stem. The birds sang the fishes, leaped up to the surface of the water. The gnats danced in the sunshine, and yonder on a rock by the heaving salt sea sat Summer, himself a strong man with sturdy limbs and long, dripping hair, strengthened by the cool bath. He sat in the warm sunshine, while all around him renewed nature bloomed strong, luxuriant, and beautiful. It was summer, warm, lovely summer. Sweet and pleasant was the fragrance wafted from the clover field, where the bees swarmed round the ruined tower. The bramble twined itself over the old altar, which, washed by the rain, glittered in the sunshine, and thither flew the queen bee with her swarm, and prepared wax and honey. But Summer and his bosom wife saw it with different eyes. To them an altar table was covered with the offerings of nature. The evening sky shone like gold. No church dome could ever gleam so brightly. And between the golden evening and the blushing morning, there was moonlight. It was indeed summer. And days and weeks passed. The bright scythes of the reapers glittered in the cornfields. The branches of the apple trees bent low heavy with the red and golden fruit, and golden. The hop, hanging in clusters, filled the air with sweet fragrance, and beneath the hazel bushes, where the nuts hung in great bunches, rested a man and a woman, Summer and his grave consort. "See," she exclaimed, "what wealth, what blessings surround us. Everything is homelike and good, and yet I know not why I long for rest and peace. I can scarcely express what I feel. They are already plowing the fields again. More and more, the people wish for gain. See, the storks are flocking together and following the plow at a short distance. They are the birds from Egypt who carried us through the air. Do you remember how we came as children to this land of the north? We brought with us flowers and bright sunshine and green to the forests. But the wind has been rough with them, and they are now become dark and brown like the trees of the south. But they do not like them, bear golden fruit. Do you wish to see golden fruit? Said the man. Then rejoice. And he lifted his arm. The leaves of the forest put on colors of red and gold, and bright tints covered the woodlands. The rose bushes gleamed with scarlet hips, and the branches of the elder trees hung down with the weight of the full, dark berries. The wild chestnuts fell ripe from their dark green shells, and in the forests the violets bloomed for the second time, but the queen of the year became more and more pregnant and pale. "It blows cold," she said, "and night brings the damp mist. I long for the land of my childhood." Then she saw the storks fly away, every one, and she stretched out her hands towards them. She looked at the empty nests. In one of them grew a long-stalked cornflower. In another, the yellow mustard seed, as if the nest had been placed there only for its comfort and protection. And the sparrows were flying round them all. "Tweet, where has the master of the nest gone?" cried one. "I suppose he could not bear it when the wind blew, and therefore he has left this country. I wish him a pleasant journey." The forest leaves became more and more yellow. Leaf after leaf fell, and the stormy winds of autumn howled. The year was now far advanced, and upon the fallen, yellow leaves lay the queen of the year, looking up with mild eyes at a gleaming star, and her husband stood by her. A gust of wind swept through the foliage, and the leaves fell in a shower. The summer queen was gone, but a butterfly, the last of the year, flew through the cold air. Damp fogs came, icy winds blew, and the long, dark nights of winter approached. The ruler of the year appeared with hair white as snow, but he knew it not. He thought snowflakes falling from the sky covered his head as they decked the green fields with a thin, white covering of snow. And then the church bells rang out for Christmas time. "The bells are ringing for the newborn year," said the ruler. "Soon will a new ruler and his bride be born. I shall go to rest with my wife in yonder light-giving star. In the fresh green fir wood, where the snow lay all around, stood the angel of Christmas and consecrated the young trees that were to adorn his feast. May there be joy in the rooms and under the green boughs," said the old ruler of the year. In a few weeks, he had become a very old man, with hair as white as snow. "My resting time draws near. The young pair of the year will soon claim my crown and scepter. But the night is still thine," said the angel of Christmas, "for power, but not for rest. Let the snow lie warmly upon the tender seed. Learn to endure the thought that another is worshipped whilst thou art still Lord. Learn to endure being forgotten while yet thou livest. The hour of thy freedom will come when spring appears." "And when will spring come?" asked Winter. "It will come when the stork returns, and with white locks and snowy beard, cold bent and hoary, but strong as the wintry storm and firm as the ice old winter, sat on the snowdrift-covered hill, looking towards the south where winter had sat before and gazed. The ice glittered, the snow crackled, the skaters skimmed over the polished surface of the lakes. Ravens and crows formed a pleasing contrast to the white ground, and not a breath of wind stirred. And in the still air, old winter clenched his fists, and the ice lay fathoms deep between the lands. Then came the sparrows again out of the town and asked, "Who is that old man?" The raven sat there still, or it might be his son, which is the same thing, and he said to them, "It is winter, the old man of the former year. He is not dead, as the calendar says, but he is guardian to the spring which is coming." "When will spring come?" asked the sparrows, "for we shall have better times then, and a better rule. The old times are worth nothing." And in quiet thought, old winter looked at the leafless forest where the graceful form and bends of each tree and branch could be seen. And while winter slept, icy mists came from the clouds, and the ruler dreamt of his youthful days and of his manhood. And in the morning dawn, the whole forest glittered with hoar frost, which the sun shook from the branches. And this was the summer dream of winter. "When will spring come?" asked the sparrows. "Spring." Again the echo sounded from the hills on which the snow lay. The sunshine became warmer, the snow melted, and the birds twittered, "Spring is coming." And high in the air flew the first stork, and the second followed. A lovely child sat on the back of each, and they sank down on the open field, kissed the earth, and kissed the quiet old man. And as the mist from the mountain top, he vanished away and disappeared. And the story of the year was finished. "This is all very fine, no doubt," said the sparrows, "and it is very beautiful. But it is not according to the calendar. Therefore, it must be all wrong." A string of pearls. The railroad in Denmark still extends only from Copenhagen to Korsør. It is a string of pearl. Europe has a wealth of these pearls. Its most costly are named Paris, London, Vienna, Naples. And yet, many a man will point out as his favorite pearl not one of these great cities, but rather some little country town that is still the home of homes to him, the home of those dearest to him. Yes, often it is not a town at all, but a single homestead, a little house hidden among green hedges, a place hardly visible as the train speeds by. How many pearls are there on the line from Copenhagen to Korsør? We will consider just 6, which most people must notice. Old memories and poetry itself give a luster to these pearls, so that they shine in our thoughts. Near the hill, where stands the palace of Frederick VI, the home of Eulenschläger's childhood. One of these pearls glistens sheltered by Sondermarken's woody ground. It used to be called the cottage of Philemon and Baucis. Here lived Rabeck and his wife, Kama. Here under their hospitable roof assembled many of the generation's finest intellects from busy Copenhagen. It was the festival home of the intellectual. Now don't say, "Ah, what a change." No, it is still the home of the intellect, a conservatory for sick plants, for buds which do not have the strength to unfold their true beauty of color and form, or show the blossoming and fruit-bearing which is hidden within them. The insane asylum, surrounded by human love, is truly a spot of holiness, a hospital for the sick plants that shall someday be transplanted to bloom in the paradise of God. The weakest minds are assembled now here, where once the strongest and keenest met to exchange thoughts and ideas. But still the flame of generosity mounts heavenward from the cottage of Philemon and Baucis, ancient Roskilde, the burial town of kings by Hroar's spring, now lies before us. The slender towers of the church lift up above the low town and mirror themselves in Isefjord. Only one grave shall we seek here. It is not that of the mighty Queen Margaret. No, within the white-walled churchyard, which we speed close by, is the grave, and over it lays a small plain stone. The master of the organ, the reviver of the old Danish romances, rests here. We recall the clear waves rolled, and there dwelt a king in Lera, Roskilde, burial place of kings. In your pearl, we see the insignificant gravestone whereon is cut a lyre, and the name Ways. Now we reach Sigersted, near the town of Ringsted. The bed of the river is low here. Yellow corn waves over the spot where Hagbarth's boat lay at anchor, not far from Signe's maiden bower. Who does not know the legend of Hagbarth, who was hanged on the oak tree while the bower of Sigyn burst into flames? Who can forget that legend of immortal love? Beautiful sorrow encircled by woods. Your quiet old cloistered town peeps out through its mossy trees. The keen eyes of youth from the academy can look across the lake toward the world's highway and hear the roar of the locomotive's dragon as it speeds through the woods. Sorrow, pearl of poetry, you are guarding the dust of Holberg. Your palace of learning stands beside the deep woodland lake like a great white swan, and nearby like the bright star flower of the woods. There gleams a tiny cottage whence pious hymns echo throughout the land. Words are spoken within, and the peasant listens and learns of Denmark's bygone days. As the song of the bird is to the greenwood, so is Ingemann to sorrow. On to the town of Slagelse, what is mirrored here. In this pearl's luster. Gone forever is the cloister of Antorskov and Antvorskov. Vanished are the rich halls of the castle, even the last remaining wing. Yet one relic of olden times still lingers here, the wooden cross on the hill. It has been repaired again and again, for it marks the spot where legend tells us Saint Anders, holy priest of Slagelse, awoke after having been brought there from Jerusalem in a single night. Korser, birthplace of Baggesen, master of words and wit. The ruined old ramparts of the fallen fortress are now the last visible witness of your childhood home. Their lengthening sunset shadows point to the spot where stood the house in which you were born. From these hills, you looked toward Sprogo and sang in undying verse. Nowhere have roses so red a hue, and nowhere are feathers so light and so blue. Nowhere the thorns so daintily grown as those to childhood innocence known. Humorous, charming singer, we shall weave for thee a garland of woodbine and fling it into the lake so that the current may bear it to the coast of Kielerfjord, where your ashes rest. The tide shall bring you a greeting from the new generation, a greeting from your birthplace, Korsor, where I drop my string of pearls. That's quite right. A string of pearls does stretch from Copenhagen to Korsor, said grandmother, when she had heard this read aloud. It's a string of pearls for me now, as it was more than 40 years ago. We had no railroad then. We spent days on a trip that can now be made in as many hours. That was in 1815, and I was 21. That is a charming age. Although to be up in the 60s, that is also a wonderful age. In my young days, it was a much rarer event than it is now to come to Copenhagen, which we considered the town of all towns. My parents hadn't visited it for 20 years, but at last they were going, and I was going with them. We had talked about that journey for years before, and now it was actually coming true. It seemed as though a new life were beginning for me. And really, in a way, a new life did begin for me. There was such a bustle of sewing and packing. And when at last we were ready to start, such a crowd of friends came to bid us farewell. It was a long journey we had ahead of us. Shortly before noon, we drove out of Odense in my parents' Holstein carriage, and our friends waved to us from the windows all the way down the street till we passed through St. Jorgen's Gate. The weather was beautiful. The birds sang, and everything was joyful. We forgot what a long and tiresome road it was to Nyborg. We reached it toward evening, but the little sailing vessel had to wait for the mail, which didn't arrive until night. Then we got on board, and as far as we could see, the wide, smooth waters lay before us. We lay down and went to sleep in our clothes. When I awoke and came on deck next morning, I could see nothing at all. A heavy fog covered everything. When I heard the cocks crowing, I knew it must be sunrise. Bells were ringing, but I didn't know where. Then the mud lifted, and we found we were still lying very close to Nyborg. Later in the day, a wind came up, but it was against us. We tacked back and forth, and at last were lucky enough to reach Korsor by a little past 11 that night, having spent 22 hours to go 16 miles. It was good to get ashore, but it was dark. The lamps were weak, and it all seemed very strange to me, who had never been in any other town but Odense. "Look," said my father. "Baggesen was born there, and Berkner lived in that house." When I heard that somehow the dark old town, with its narrow little streets, seemed to grow larger and brighter, and we were so glad to feel solid earth under our feet. There was no sleep for me that night, for I was so excited over all that I had seen and heard since I had left home the day before. Next morning, we had to leave early. There was a terrible road ahead of us, with great bumps and holes as far as Slagelse, and not much better from there on. And we wanted to get to the Crab Inn early, so that on the same day we could reach Soro and visit the Möller's Emil, as we called him then. Yes, he was your grandfather, my late husband, the dean. I was a student at Soro then, and had just passed his second examination. That afternoon, we reached the Crab Inn, which was a gallant place. At that time, the very best inn on the whole trip, with the prettiest country around it. Yes, but you must all admit that it still is. Madame Plambeck was an industrious hostess, and everything in her house was as smoothly scoured as a larding board. On the wall, they had framed under glass Baggesen's letter to her. It was indeed worth seeing, and I greatly enjoyed looking at it. Then he went to Sora and found Emil there. You can imagine how glad we were to see him, and he to see us. He was so thoughtful and charming. He took us to see the church and the graves of Absalon and Holberg. He inspected the old monkish inscriptions with us and sailed with us across the lake to Parnasset. It was the most wonderful evening, I remember. I was thinking that to become a poet, one had only to come to Sora and meditate among those lovely peaceful scenes. By moonlight, we followed the Philosopher's Walk, as it's called, the wonderful and lonely little path beside the lake that joins the highway near the Crab Inn. Emil stayed for supper with us, and my father and my mother declared he had grown so sensible and looked so well. It was almost Whitsuntide, and he promised that in a few days he would be in Copenhagen to join us and his family. Ah, those few hours in Soro and at the Crab Inn I count among the choicest pearls of my life. Next morning, we again started very early, for we had a long trip to Roskilde, where we wanted to see the church, and Father wanted to visit an old school friend that evening. We spent that night in Roskilde and reached Copenhagen by noon the next day. So we had spent about 3 days on a journey that can now be made in 3 hours. Korsør to Copenhagen. The pearls on that way have not grown more costly. That could never be. But the string is new and wonderful. I stayed with my parents in Copenhagen for 3 weeks. Emil was with us for 18 whole days, and when we returned to Funen, he went with us as far as Korsør. There, before we parted, we were betrothed. So it is no wonder I should call the road from Copenhagen to Korsør a string of pearls. Afterwards, when Emil received his post at Assens, we were married. We often talked about that journey to Copenhagen and intended doing it again. But then your mother came along, and after her came her brothers and sisters, and with all of them, there was so much to do and take care of. Then your grandfather was promoted and made a dean. Yes, everything was happiness and joy, but we never got to Copenhagen again. No, I have never been there since, though we often thought and talked about it. Now I'm much too old to travel by rail, but still, I'm right glad there is a railway. It's a real blessing, because it brings you, young ones, to me more quickly. Nowadays, Odense is hardly farther from Copenhagen than in my youth. It was from Nyborg. You can speed to Italy in the time it took us to reach Copenhagen. Yes, that is certainly something. It doesn't matter that I just sit here always. Let the others travel, so long as they sometimes travel to me. And you needn't laugh at me. You young people for sitting so still here, day after day. I have really a wonderful journey ahead of me. I shall soon have to travel at a speed far greater than the railways. For when our Lord calls me, I shall go to join your grandfather. And when you have completed your work on this dear earth, you too will join us. And then, if we talk over the days of our mortal life, believe me, dear children, I shall say, then as I do now, from Copenhagen to Korsør is a perfect string of pearls. At the uttermost parts of the sea, far beyond the boundaries of ordinary human endeavor, 2 mighty ships were sent toward the uncharted crown of the world, the North Pole. Their mission was to trace the limits of sea and land, to discern how far the courage and endurance of humankind might press into that silent kingdom of frost and mystery. It was an age of explorers, when the thirst for knowledge burned brighter than the hearths they left behind. A year and a day had passed since their departure. They had sailed through roaring tempests and seas of drifting ice, through fog thick as sleep, and winds sharp as glass. Now, winter had returned with relentless sovereignty. The sun, their faithful companion, through every voyage had vanished below the horizon. Night long, absolute, unbroken, descended like a curtain over the polar world. Weeks would pass before its first faint light would dare to return. The ships were imprisoned in a boundless white plain, frozen fast to the surface of the sea. Around them stretched a wilderness of ice, towering ridges, and glittering deserts sculpted by the hand of the eternal cold. The sailors resigned to their fate, built huts from packed snow and shaped them like beehives, some large enough for a crew to gather, others so small that only 2 or 3 men could huddle together for warmth. Though surrounded by night, it was no darkness they lived in. The northern lights danced above them in 1,000 shifting hues: crimson, sapphire, emerald, and gold, rippling across the heavens like banners of celestial fire. The snow below caught their colors and reflected them in shimmering brilliance, so that even in the deep of night, the whole frozen land glowed with a radiant twilight that never truly ceased. At the height of that spectral brightness came visitors' figures, unlike any they had seen, natives of the north, wrapped in thick furs, their faces half hidden beneath hoods of animal skin. They rode upon sleds carved from blocks of ice, drawn by sturdy dogs that barked joyfully at the strangers. They carried bundles of pelts, reindeer, hides, and seal skins, warm treasures that the sailors gladly traded for iron knives and beads. These skins became the sailors' rugs and blankets, soft barriers between their weary bodies and the cruel breath of the Arctic wind. Outside, the air froze one's breath to frost, but inside the snow, huts flickered small lamps of whale oil, casting golden halos upon the white, curved walls. In such moments, when silence fell, and only the wind howled faintly, in the distance, the sailors' thoughts drifted homeward. They imagined the world beyond the ice, the orchards of autumn still glowing with russet and gold, the quiet villages nestled beneath crimson leaves, and the warmth of hearth fires that painted orange light upon cottage windows. It was hard to believe that somewhere far away, children still played in fields, and women gathered harvest fruits beneath the lingering sun. Inside one of the snow huts, 2 sailors lay wrapped in their furs. The younger of the 2 held close a precious keepsake, a small, worn Bible, the gift of his grandmother on the day he had left home. It was his treasure, his talisman, the silent voice of comfort that had followed him from the gentle meadows of his birth to the desolate plains of ice. Each evening, he read a passage, and each night he placed the book beneath his head before sleep. From childhood, he had known those words by heart, and one verse above all others dwelt within him like a living fire. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. He whispered those words into the darkness, and they seemed to glow in his mind, brighter than the northern lights themselves. Under their power, peace came over him. His eyelids grew heavy, and the pulse of the cold world faded from his hearing. He slept, and in sleep he dreamed. In his dream, he felt that though the body rested, the soul never truly slept. It wandered free alive with memory and longing. He heard music, faint and distant songs from his homeland hymns his grandmother used to hum beside the fire. A soft summer breeze touched his face, carrying the scent of grass and orchard blossoms. Then, slowly, the snowy roof above him grew luminous, transparent as crystal, until he lay beneath a radiance like dawn itself. From that light descended a figure, an angel, vast yet gentle, its wings unfolding like sails of pearl. The angel's face shone with the calm of eternity, and in its eyes was the tender knowledge of every sorrow and every joy the young sailor had ever known. The holy being bent over him, and from the open Bible at his side rose a glow, as if a flower of pure light had blossomed from its pages. The angel's hands extended, and the walls of the snow hut dissolved into mist, thinning like morning fog under sunlight. Suddenly, he stood again in his homeland. Around him stretched green meadows, rolling hills, and red-brown forests bathed in mellow autumn light. The storks' nests were empty now, but apples clung to the branches of wild trees, their skins glimmering with frost. Red rose hips shone in the hedges, and through an open window, he heard the familiar whistle of the blackbird in its cage. His heart leapt. It was the very bird he had taught to sing as a boy, and there, just as before, sat his grandmother, her silver hair wrapped in a kerchief, twining chickweed through the cage bars, as she always did for him. Near the well stood the blacksmith's daughter, the one whose smile had haunted his memory, even amidst the ice. Her cheeks were flushed with the cool air as she drew up water, sparkling in the bucket. She waved toward the cottage, and the old grandmother beckoned her inside. Together, they read a letter that had just arrived, a letter from the far north, sealed and stamped with a name they loved. It told of peril and courage of a young sailor who yet lived beneath the protection of God. Even in the frozen ends of the earth, they laughed, they cried, their hands trembling with joy. And the sailor, though his body still slept beneath the snows of the Arctic, saw and heard it all. He felt their joy, their tears, their faith. He was both present and afar, embraced by love that distance could not sever. From the letter, his grandmother read aloud the very verse that lay open beside his resting head. Even at the uttermost parts of the sea, his right hand shall hold me fast. At those words, the angel's wings curved downward, folding around him like a soft veil of light. A psalm rose in the air, sung not by mortal voices, but by something eternal, harmonious, serene. The melody flowed through his dream until all sound faded into peace. When the dream ended, darkness returned. The snow hut stood silent once more. The lamp burned low, and froth glittered faintly on the walls. But beneath the sailor's head lay his Bible, and within his heart still dwelt faith and hope. God was with him, and through that faith, his home, his loved ones, and all the warmth of life itself were with him too, even at the uttermost parts of the sea. The swan's nest between the restless waves of the Baltic and the storm-kissed waters of the North Sea, there lies an ancient cradle of white feathers, an old swan's nest resting upon the green and golden marshlands of the north. There beneath drifting mists and under skies that never forget the light of dawn, swans were born, proud, pure and eternal. And from that nest have come those who shall never die in the memory of humankind. In the days when the world was still young, and the air smelled of iron and pine, a great flock of swans rose into the blue. They spread their wings like banners of snow and turned toward the south, their plumage flashing like swords in the sun. Across the high Alps they flew, where the air was thin and sharp, and the mountains glittered like frozen waves. At last they came to rest upon the wide green plains near Milan, fertile, sun-warmed, and bright with rivers and vineyards. There they settled, and men called them the Lombards, the swans of the south, who carried with them the northern courage and the cool purity of the snows they had left behind. Another flight turned eastward, their feathers catching the dawn light as they soared above the endless forests and seas. These were the proud and loyal swans who found their resting place in Byzantium, that city of gold and domes where empires dreamed and kings bent their heads beneath heaven's will. There beside the emperor's throne, they made their home guardians of majesty, shields of loyalty. Their wings spread wide above the ruler of men, gleaming like silver in the light of 1,000 candles. And they were named the Varangians, the faithful ones, whose courage stood between the throne and its enemies. Yet not all who came from the northern nest brought comfort. On the shores of France, there rose a cry of fear, sharp and desperate, as the wail of the wind before a storm. The blood-red light of burning villages glowed beneath the wings of the wild swans that descended from the north. With fire in their eyes and steel in their talons, they came the Northmen, whose ships were like floating dragons, and whose oars bit the sea with hunger. And the people prayed, "Heaven, deliver us from the wrath of the north, from the swans of storm and flame, across the green fields and cliffs of England." The Danish swan stood proud and bright beside the open shore. Upon his head he bore the crown of 3 kingdoms, and in his grasp was the scepter of gold that ruled over sea and land. His voice rolled like thunder over the isles, and his banner cast a shadow long as the coast itself. On the wild Pomeranian coasts, where the forests met the tide, the heathen bent their knees before the sign of the cross, for the Danish swans had come again, this time not as raiders, but as bearers of faith. The banner of the white Christ waved beside the drawn sword. The swan's wings, once darkened by war, now gleamed with the pale fire of redemption. That was long ago, you say, the ancient times. Yes, the centuries have flown as the swans once flew, yet the nest between the seas remains. And from it, through each age, the world has seen new wings unfold, new songs arise. In later days, when the mists of ignorance hung over the earth, and men still groped for truth in the twilight of reason, another swan rose from the old nest. His wings shone with strange and holy light. Not the light of battle, nor the light of faith, but the light of knowledge, of stars and heavens. With every beat of his wings, the darkness broke apart. The firmament itself drew nearer to mortal eyes. That swan was Tycho Brahe, who read the language of the stars as if they were written for him alone. Through his eyes, the sky became a mirror of divine order, and men saw that the world was vast beyond imagining, yet ruled by law, by beauty, by the same quiet hand that had shaped the first feather on the first swan. Yes, that was then, you say again. But what of our own time? Listen, the wings have not fallen silent. We have seen swan after swan rise into the blue, each bearing a gift for the world. One let his wings glide over the golden strings of a harp, and the sound flowed northward like sunlight through a frozen forest. Mountains rose higher beneath the melody. Pines whispered again of the old gods and heroes. The spirits of Norway's valleys stirred from their sleep. The songs of ancient days lived anew in that music, and the hearts of men remembered that they too had wings. Another swan came and struck his mighty wings upon the marble of the earth. The rock trembled, cracked, and burst, and from within came forth forms of beauty that had waited centuries for the touch of light. They stepped into the day, radiant and free, the children of stone reborn. And the people of many lands lifted up their heads, astonished by these new wonders. For they saw in them not just sculpture, but revelation, the soul of man made visible. A third swan wove threads, not of silk or gold, but of thought itself. He spun them from land to land, from ocean to ocean, until the world was bound by an invisible web. Upon those shining cords, words could fly swifter than the wind bearing love knowledge and the news of nations. His song was the song of connection, the heartbeat of the earth made one, and still the nest remains ancient yet alive. The Lord of heaven, it is said, has a tender love for that nest between the Baltic and the North Sea. For it is not merely a home of birds, but a symbol of spirit of courage, endurance, and the strange divine fire that cannot die. When storms gather and black wings of war descend to strike it down, the young swans, untested, unblooded, rise to its defense. They form a circle around their cradle of reeds and wind. Their breasts are pierced, their feathers reddened, yet they do not flee. With wings and claws, they strike against the invaders, and their cries mingle with the roar of thunder. They fight not only for the nest, but for all that it means. The memory of flight, the dream of freedom, the promise that beauty and faith will rise again from ruin. Centuries will pass. Empires will crumble into dust, and new ones will grow where old ones stood. The languages of men will change, the cities will fade, and even the stars themselves may wander. But from the northern nest, the swans will still rise, proud, white, and luminous. They will fly across oceans of time, and men will see them and remember that they too are born of the same air, the same longing for the sky. And one day, far in the future, when the last echoes of battle and the last songs of sorrow have quieted over the earth, there will come a final swan. His wings will gleam with all the light of those who came before him. His voice will hold the memory of every song. He will rise alone into the eternal blue, and the world will look up in wonder. Then, and only then, will it be said in spirit and in truth, "This is the last swan, the last song from the swan's nest." There is a difference. It was in the month of May. The wind was still cold, but spring had come, said the trees, and the bushes, the fields, and the meadows. Everywhere, flowers were budding into blossom. Even the hedges were alive with them. Here spring spoke about herself. It spoke from a little apple tree, from which hung a single branch, so fresh and blooming, and fairly weighed down by a glorious mass of rosy buds just ready to open. Now this branch knew how lovely it was, for that knowledge lies in the leaf as well as in the flesh. So it wasn't a bit surprised when one day a grand carriage stopped in the road beside it, and the young countess in the carriage said that this apple branch was the most beautiful she had ever seen. It was spring itself in its loveliest form, so she broke off the apple branch and carried it in her own dainty hand, shading it from the sun with her silk parasol as they drove on to her castle, in which there were lofty halls and beautifully decorated rooms. Fleecy white curtains fluttered at its open windows, and there were many shining, transparent vases full of beautiful flowers. In one of these vases, which looked as if it were carved of new fallen snow, she placed the apple branch among fresh, green beech leaves. A lovely sight indeed. And so it happened that the apple branch grew proud, and that's quite human. All sorts of people passed through the rooms, and according to their rank, expressed their admiration in different ways. Some said too much, some said too little, and some said nothing at all. And the apple branch began to realize that there were differences in people as well as in plants. Some are used for nourishment, some are for ornament, and some you could very well do without, thought the apple branch from its position at the open window. The apple branch could look down over the gardens and meadows below and consider the differences among the flowers and plants beneath. Some were rich, some were poor, and some were very poor. Rejected plants, said the apple branch. There is a difference indeed. It's quite proper, and just that distinctions should be made. Yet how unhappy they must feel. If indeed a creature like that is capable of feeling anything as I and my equals do. But it must be that way, otherwise everybody would be treated as though they were just alike. And the apple branch looked down with especial pity on one kind of flower that grew everywhere in meadows and ditches. They were much too common ever to be gathered into bouquets. They could be found between the paving stones. They shot up like the rankest and most worthless of weeds. They were dandelions, but people have given them the ugly name, the devil's milk pails. Poor wretched outcasts, said the apple branch. I suppose you can't help being as common as you are and having such a vulgar name. It's the same with plants as with men. There must be a difference. A difference, repeated the sunbeam as it kissed the apple branch, but it kissed the golden devil's milk pails too. And all the other sunbeams did the same kissing all the flowers, equally poor as well as rich. The apple branch had never thought about our Lord's infinite love for everything that lives and moves in him, had never thought how much that it is good and beautiful can lie hidden but still not be forgotten. And that, too, was human. But the sunbeam, the ray of light, knew better. You don't see very clearly. You are not very far-sighted. Who are these outcast flowers that you pity so much? Those devil's milk pails down there, replied the apple branch. Nobody ever ties them up in bouquets. They're trodden underfoot because there are too many of them. And when they go to seed, they fly about along the road like little bits of wool and hang on people's clothes. They're just weeds. I suppose there must be weeds too. But I'm certainly happy and grateful that I'm not like one of them. Now a whole flock of children ran out into the meadow to play. The youngest of them was so tiny that he had to be carried by the others. When they set him down in the grass among the golden blossoms, he laughed and gurgled with joy, kicked his little legs, rolled over and over, and plucked only the yellow dandelions. These he kissed in innocent delight. The bigger children broke off the flowers of the dandelions and joined the hollow stalks, link by link, into chains. First, they would make one for a necklace, then a longer one to hang across the shoulders and around the waist, and finally, one to go around their heads. It was a beautiful wreath of splendid green links and chains, but the biggest of the children carefully gathered the stalks that had gone to seed those loose, aerial, woolly blossoms, those wonderfully perfect balls of dainty white plumes, and held them to their lips, trying to blow away all the white feathers with one breath. Granny had told them that whoever could do that would receive new clothes before the year was out. The poor, despised dandelion was considered quite a prophet on such occasions. Now, do you see? Asked the sunbeam. Do you see its beauty and power? Oh, it's all right for children, replied the apple branch. Now an old woman came into the meadow. She stooped and dug up the roots of the dandelion with a blunt knife that had lost its handle. Some of the roots she would roast instead of coffee berries. Others she would sell to the apothecary to be used as drugs. Beauty is something higher than this, said the apple branch. Only the chosen few can really be allowed into the kingdom of the beautiful. There's as much difference between plants as between men. Then the sunbeam spoke of the infinite love of the Creator for all his creatures, for everything that has life, and of the equal distribution of all things in time and eternity. That's just your opinion, replied the apple branch. Now some people came into the room, and among them was the young countess who had placed the apple branch in the transparent vase. She was carrying a flower, or whatever it was, that was protected by 3 or 4 large leaves around it, like a cap, so that no breath of air or gust of wind could injure it. She carried it more carefully and tenderly than she had the apple branch when she had brought it to the castle. Very gently, she removed the leaves, and then the apple branch could see what she carried. It was a delicate, feathery crown of starry seeds, borne by the despised dandelion. This was what she had plucked so carefully and carried so tenderly, so that no single one of the loose, dainty feathered arrows that rounded out its downy form should be blown away. There it was, whole and perfect. With delight, she admired the beautiful form, the airy lightness, the marvelous mechanism of a thing that was destined so soon to be scattered by the wind. Look how wonderfully beautiful our Lord made this, she cried. I'll paint it together with the apple branch. Everybody thinks it is so extremely beautiful. But this poor flower is lovely too. It has received as much from our Lord in another way. They are very different, yet both are children in the kingdom of the beautiful. The sunbeam kissed the poor dandelion, and then kissed the blooming apple branch, whose petals seemed to blush a deeper red. The shirt collar, once in the wardrobe of a fine and fashionable gentleman, there lived a shirt collar of quite extraordinary pretensions. The gentleman possessed, among other worldly treasures, a boot jack, a hairbrush, and a comb of tortoiseshell. But the pride of all these possessions was the collar, white high and stiff, so fine in linen, and so grand in opinion, that it imagined itself the noblest piece of apparel ever starched. Now this self-important collar grew older with time, and one day, while floating in the soapy waters of the washtub, he began to dream of romance and marriage. A gentleman, such as I, he mused, ought not to live alone forever, as fate would have it. That very morning, he found himself beside a delicate blue garter, glimmering like a ribbon of sky in the suds. Upon my word, cried the collar, twisting gallantly. I have never beheld anything so slender, so graceful, so irresistibly refined. May I be so bold as to inquire your name, fair lady? I shall not tell you, replied the garter, blushing beneath the bubbles. Ah, mysterious too, That only adds to your charm, continued the caller. Might I at least ask where you reside, when not bathing in this distinguished company? But the garter, modest by nature and shy of strangers, gave no answer. I presume, said the caller, lowering his voice, that you are some sort of girdle, a dainty under, perhaps. How fitting, so useful, and yet so exquisitely ornamental. A perfect combination of grace and service. You must not speak to me, said the garter firmly. I do not recall giving you permission. Oh, my dear, said the caller, puffing up his starch. When beauty such as yours exists in the world, is it not encouragement enough for a gentleman to speak? Go away, said the garter. You come far too close. I find it improper. Improper, exclaimed the caller. Why, my dear, I am a man of standing, a fine gentleman. I own a boot jack and a hairbrush. This, of course, was quite untrue. Both belonged to his master. But the caller, alas, was a born boaster. The garter turned away, wishing the wash tub would swallow her whole. You are insufferable, she said, and very presumptuous. The caller only laughed, sending tiny rings across the water. Ah, modesty becomes you, he said. A little coquetry adds warmth to beauty. Before the garter could retort, the washerwoman's hands swooped down. Both were lifted from the rinsed and pegged upon a line beneath the bright morning sun. There they hung, two prisoners in the breeze, until they were carried indoors, starched stiff, and laid upon the ironing board. Then came the glowing iron hissing like a dragon. Mistress Widow, said the caller. Dear Mistress Widow, I feel positively warm in your company. I am changing, transforming beneath your touch. You are burning a hole straight through my heart. Oh, accept my hand, know my seam, I propose to you. You old rag, said the flat iron indignantly, pressing harder as if to punish him. You miserable scrap of cloth, do you fancy yourself worthy of a steam engine like me? She puffed and rolled along the board, as if she were indeed an iron horse upon its railway, while the collar hissed and whimpered beneath her weight. Soon after, his frayed edges were trimmed by a pair of sharp scissors. Ah, sighed the caller in admiration. What elegance of motion, what grace. You lift your leg, so slender, so precise. Truly, you dance divinely. I doubt any human could match your step. I should think not, replied the scissors coldly. You ought to be a countess, said the caller, swelling with admiration. Were fortune mine, I would lay an estate at your feet. As it is, I have only my fine gentleman, a boot jack, and a comb, but my devotion is priceless. What insolence, cried the scissors. Is he proposing to me? Her temper flared. Her blades snapped angrily, and in her fury, she snipped too deeply. The poor collar screamed as a piece of him fell away. "Ah, cruel beauty," he groaned, and so he was cast aside as useless. I shall have to propose to the hairbrush. Next thought, the collar refusing to surrender his vanity. One day, spying her on the dressing table, he began flatteringly, "My dear lady, what magnificent hair you have, each strand more splendid than golden thread. Tell me, have you never dreamed of being engaged?" "Why, of course," replied the brush briskly. "I am already engaged to the bootjack." "Engaged," cried the collar in despair. "Then there is no one left for me. Very well, I shall renounce love forever." From that hour, he pretended to despise romance, though in secret he mourned every lost opportunity. Time passed. The gentleman wore him no more. Torn, yellowed, and stiff, the collar was thrown into a bag with other rags and carried to the paper mill. There, among heaps of linen remnants and tattered cloth, lay a great company of cast-off finery, each scrap with a history, each eager to boast of better days. "I was once a lace cuff at court," said one. "I adorned the wrist of a duchess," said another. But talked louder than the shirt collar. "I have known more love affairs than any of you," he proclaimed proudly. "No one ever left me in peace. I was irresistible, a perfect gentleman, with my own bootjack and hairbrush, naturally. You should have seen me when freshly starched, my corners sharp as virtue itself. Ah, my first love, a garter of the softest silk, threw herself into the wash-tub for my sake. And the widow, the flat-iron poor creature, she burned herself with passion for me. The dancer, the scissors, wounded me deeply. Love can be so cutting. Even the hairbrush lost all her hair from neglected affection. Oh, I have suffered in romance beyond measure. My conscience is heavy with broken hearts. Truly, it is time I be turned into white paper to begin anew." And indeed, that is exactly what befell him. The rags were soaked, beaten, and pulped until nothing of their former selves remained. When they emerged again, they were reborn as sheets of clean white paper, smooth, silent, and waiting. And one of those sheets, dear reader, was the very collar himself. Thus it happens that the story you are reading now is printed upon the remains of that vain and boasting shirt collar. It is his confession and his punishment, his pride ironed flat forever. So let this be a warning to all who boast of false glories, for pride, like linen, may one day find itself tossed into the rag bag, and our deeds, every little vanity, every hidden lie, may be written plainly for the world to read, just as his were. And would it not be dreadful to wander about the earth as a piece of paper, revealing every secret deed, as did the once proud, now humble shirt collar. The loveliest rose in the world. There once lived a mighty queen, whose palace stood amidst terraces of marble and gardens that seemed to breathe with eternal spring. Every path was lined with blossoms from every corner of the world, from far eastern orchids that smelled of moonlight to desert lilies that bloomed only beneath starlit silence. Yet above all these wonders, the queen's heart belonged to the rose. She loved it in all its forms, the humble hedge rose that perfumed the hedgerows with apple sweetness, and the proud Provence rose whose petals blushed like dawn upon snow. Roses climbed the pillars of her galleries, trailed over the archways, and framed her windows with living garlands. They spread their fragrance through the corridors, and even upon the ceilings of her great halls, where the air was always heavy with their perfume. But though her palace overflowed with life and beauty, care and sorrow had taken up residence within those glittering walls. The queen, so adored by her people, so blessed in riches, lay upon a couch of silk, pale and still as a fallen petal. The physicians wise, in all the arts of healing, could offer no remedy. Her end draws near, they whispered. Yet one among them, the eldest and most learned, lifted his head and spoke with calm conviction. There is still one hope. If we could bring to her the loveliest rose in all the world, one that embodies the purest, brightest love, and if her eyes behold it before they close forever, she shall not die. Then word went out across kingdoms and seas. Messengers galloped through snow and storm. Sailors braved tempest and tide. From every garden came those who bore roses, some golden as sunrise, others red as coral, others white as frost. Yet none of these could save her. They were beautiful, but not that rose, not the flower born in the garden of love itself. And so, poets and priests, mothers and maidens, each offered their thought of where the truest love might bloom. The poets sang for they had dreamed of this rose all their lives. They wrote verses filled with longing and faith. But when their blossoms were brought before the queen, their fragrance faded like sighs in the air. No one has found it, said the wise man sadly. No one has named the place where it grows in its full glory. It is not the rose that sprang from the tomb of Romeo and Juliet, though that flower is nourished by tears of eternal devotion. It is not the bloom that blossomed upon Walberg's grave, though holy legends sing of it. Nor is it the crimson flower, born from the blood of Winkelried, the hero who died for his country. Noble though such blood be sacred, though such sacrifice remains. The color of courage cannot equal the hue of divine love. Neither does it grow in the secret gardens of science, where lonely seekers spend sleepless nights sacrificing youth to wrest miracles from nature's hand. No, the loveliest rose must spring from a soil far deeper from the heart. Then among the courtiers stepped a gentle mother, her face bright with faith. In her arms she carried her little child, whose laughter seemed to scatter sunlight through the chamber. "I know where it blooms," she said softly. "I have seen the loveliest rose. It opens upon the cheeks of my child when after peaceful sleep he wakes and smiles at me with innocent love. That smile, that trust, is the purest rose that heaven allows to grow on earth." The wise man smiled tenderly. "It is indeed a lovely rose," he said, "and its scent is holy. But there is one lovelier still." Then a woman stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I have seen it too," she said, "and no rose on earth can match it. It was pale, white as a petal, kissed by moonlight, and I saw it upon the cheeks of our queen herself. For through one long, sorrowful night, she carried her sick child in her arms. She laid aside her golden crown, forgot her rank and majesty, and wept over her little one. She kissed him, prayed for him, and held him until dawn broke. That white rose was born of a mother's grief, pure as snow upon an altar." The wise man bowed his head. "Holy indeed is that rose," he murmured. "It is watered by tears of love and pain, and its beauty is beyond mortal art. Yet even that is not the one we seek." Silence fell. The lamps flickered. Outside the garden, roses drooped, as if they too waited. At last, an old bishop lifted his staff and spoke. "I have seen the rose," said he at the Lord's table. "It shone brighter than gold, for I saw a young maiden kneel before the altar and renew the vows of her baptism. Upon her cheeks glowed both red and white, the roses of purity and faith united. Her eyes were lifted to heaven, with love unshadowed her soul, radiant as an angel's. In that moment, I beheld the expression of the highest love on earth. Blessed be, she said the wise man reverently. Yet still, none has brought the loveliest rose in the world. Then the door creaked open, and into the chamber came a child, the queen's own little son. His small hands held a great book, bound in velvet, clasped with silver. Tears sparkled on his cheeks like dew upon a morning flower. He climbed to his mother's side and cried, "Mother, listen to what I have read." And he opened the holy book and began to read with trembling voice the words of him who gave his life for all mankind, even for those yet unborn. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. As he spoke, a gentle color, soft and rose, returned to the queen's cheeks. Her eyes, once dim, grew bright with wonder, for from the pages of that sacred book she beheld not with mortal sight, but with the vision of the soul, a rose unfolding radiant beyond all earthly bloom. Its petals glowed with divine light. Its fragrance filled the room with peace. It was the image of him who hung upon the cross, shedding his blood in love that knows no end. I see it, whispered the queen. Yes, now I see the loveliest rose in all the world. The rose that never fades, the rose of eternal love. And as she gazed upon it, strength flowed back into her heart. Her pain was lifted. Her breath came gently, like the sigh of spring wind among blossoms. The wise man bowed low and said softly, "He who beholds this rose shall never die." Outside in the royal gardens, the other roses seemed to bow their heads. The air grew fragrant, as if heaven itself had breathed upon the earth. And though the petals of the worldly flowers fell with the turning of seasons, the queen's rose, the rose of divine love, bloomed forever in her soul, shining with the promise that love stronger than death is the truest flower of all. The old gravestone in a house with a large courtyard in a provincial town at that time of the year, in which people say the evenings are growing longer. A family circle were gathered together at their old home. A lamp burned on the table, although the weather was mild and warm, and the long curtains hung down before the open windows, and without the moon shone brightly in the dark blue sky. But they were not talking of the moon, but of a large, old stone that lay below in the courtyard, not very far from the kitchen door. The maids often laid the clean copper saucepans and kitchen vessels on this stone that they might dry in the sun, and the children were fond of playing on it. It was, in fact, an old gravestone. "Yes," said the master of the house. "I believe the stone came from the graveyard of the old church of the convent, which was pulled down, and the pulpit, the monuments, and the gravestones sold. My father bought the latter. Most of them were cut in two and used for paving stones. But that one stone was preserved whole and laid in the courtyard. Anyone can see that it is a gravestone," said the eldest of the children. The representation of an hourglass and part of the figure of an angel can still be traced, but the inscription beneath is quite worn out, excepting the name Preben and a large S close by it, and a little farther down the name of Martha can be easily read. But nothing more, and even that cannot be seen unless it has been raining, or when we have washed the stone. Dear me, how singular! Why, that must be the gravestone of Preben Swan and his wife. The old man who said this looked old enough to be the grandfather of all present in the room. Yes, he continued, these people were among the last who were buried in the churchyard of the old convent. They were a very worthy old couple. I can remember them well in the days of my boyhood. Everyone knew them, and they were esteemed by all. They were the oldest residents in the town, and people said they possessed a ton of gold. Yet they were always very plainly dressed in the coarsest stuff, but with linen of the purest whiteness. Preben and Martha were a fine old couple, and when they both sat on the bench at the top of the steep stone steps in front of their house, with the branches of the linden tree waving above them, and nodded in a gentle, friendly way to passers-by, it really made one feel quite happy. They were very good to the poor. They fed them and clothed them, and in their benevolence there was judgment as well as true Christianity. The old woman died first. That day is still quite vividly before my eyes. I was a little boy and had accompanied my father to the old man's house. Martha had fallen into the sleep of death just as we arrived there. The corpse lay in a bedroom near to the one in which we sat, and the old man was in great distress and weeping like a child. He spoke to my father and to a few neighbors who were there of how lonely he should feel now. She was gone, and how good and true she, his dead wife, had been during the number of years that they had passed through life together, and how they had become acquainted and learnt to love each other. I was, as I have said, a boy, and only stood by and listened to what the others said. But it filled me with a strange emotion to listen to the old man and to watch how the color rose in his cheeks as he spoke of the days of their courtship, of how beautiful she was, and how many little tricks he had been guilty of that he might meet her. And then he talked of his wedding day, and his eyes brightened, and he seemed to be carried back by his words to that joyful time. And yet, there she was, lying in the next room, dead. An old woman, and he was an old man, speaking of the days of hope, long passed away. Ah, well, so it is. Then I was but a child, and now I am old as Preben Swan then was. Time passes away, and all things changed. I can remember quite well the day on which she was buried, and how old Preben walked close behind the coffin. A few years before, this time, the old couple had had their gravestone prepared with an inscription and their names, but not the date. In the evening, the stone was taken to the churchyard, and laid on the grave. A year later, it was taken up that old Preben might be laid by the side of his wife. They did not leave behind them wealth. They left behind them far less than people had believed they possessed. What there was went to families distantly related to them, of whom, till then, no one had ever heard. The old house, with its balcony of wickerwork, and the bench at the top of the high steps under the lime tree, was considered by the road inspectors too old and rotten to be left standing. Afterwards, when the same fate befell the convent church, and the graveyard was destroyed, the gravestone of Preben and Martha, like everything else, was sold to whoever would buy it. And so it happened that this stone was not cut in two, as many others had been, but now lies in the courtyard below, a scouring block for the maids and a playground for the children. The paved street now passes over the resting place of old Preben and his wife. No one thinks of them any more now, and the old man who had spoken of all this shook his head mournfully and said, "Forgotten. Everything will be forgotten." And then the conversation turned on other matters. But the youngest child in the room, a boy with large, earnest eyes, mounted upon a chair behind the window curtains and looked out into the yard, where the moon was pouring a flood of light on the old gravestone, the stone that had always appeared to him so dull and flat, but which lay there now like a great leaf out of a book of history. All that the boy had heard of old Preben and his wife seemed clearly defined on the stone, and as he gazed on it and glanced at the clear, bright moon shining in the pure air, it was as if the light of God's countenance beamed over his beautiful world. "Forgotten everything will be forgotten," still echoed through the room, and in the same moment, an invisible spirit whispered to the heart of the boy, "Preserve carefully the seed that has been entrusted to thee, that it may grow and thrive. Guard it well. Through thee, my child, shall the obliterated inscription on the old weather-beaten gravestone go forth to future generations in clear golden characters. The old pair shall again wander through the streets, arm in arm, or sit with their fresh, healthy cheeks on the bench under the lime tree, and smile and nod at rich and poor. The seed of this hour shall ripen in the course of years into a beautiful poem. The beautiful and the good are never forgotten. They live always in story or in song. A leaf from heaven, high up, in the thin, clear air, there flew an angel, bearing a flower from the garden of heaven. As he kissed it, a tiny leaf drifted down into the muddy soil in the middle of the wood. It very soon took root there and sprouted and sent up shoots among the other plants. "That's a funny kind of slip," said the plants, and neither the thistle nor the stinging nettle would have anything to do with the stranger. It must be some low kind of garden plant, they said, grinning and making fun at it. But it grew and grew, and like no other plant, its long branches spread far about. "Where do you think you're going?" said the tall thistles, who have thorns on each of their leaves. "You're taking a good deal of space. That's a lot of nonsense. We can't stand here and support you." When winter came, the snow covered the plant, but from it, the blanket of snow received a glow as if the sun were shining from below. Then the spring returned, and the plant was in glorious bloom, more beautiful than any other in the forest. And there came to the forest a professor of botany who could show what he was with many degrees. He carefully inspected the plant and tested it, but decided it was not included in his system of botany. He could not possibly learn to what class it did belong. "This must be some unimportant variety," he said. "I certainly don't know it. It's not included in any system." "Not included in any system," said the thistles and the nettles. The big trees, which grew round it, heard what was said, and they also saw the tree was not one of their kind, but they said nothing good or bad. And that is much the wisest course for stupid people to take. Then a poor innocent girl came through the forest. Her heart was pure, and her understanding was glorious with faith. Her only inheritance was an old Bible, but from its pages the voice of God spoke to her. "If people wish to do you evil, remember the story of Joseph. They had evil in their hearts, but God turned it to good. If you suffer wrong, if you are despised and misunderstood, then you must remember the words of Him who was purity and goodness itself, and who prayed for those who struck Him and nailed Him to the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." She stopped before the wondrous plant, whose great leaves gave forth sweet and refreshing fragrance, and whose flowers glowed in the sun like a wonderful firework of color. And from each flower there came a sound, as though it held concealed within itself a deep well of melody that thousands of years would not empty. With devout gratitude, the girl gazed on this exquisite work of the Creator and bent down one of the branches that she might examine the flower and breathe in its sweetness. And a lovely light burned in her soul. It seemed to uplift her heart, and she wanted to pluck a flower, but she had not the heart to break one off, for she knew it would soon fade if she did. So she took only a single green leaf, carried it home, and there she pressed it in between the pages of her Bible. And it lay there, quite fresh, always green, and never fading. It was kept in the pages of that Bible. And with that Bible, it was placed under the girl's head when, some weeks thereafter, she lay in her coffin. On her gentle face was the solemn peace of death, as if the earthly remains carried the imprint of the truth that she now was in the presence of her Creator. But the marvelous plant still bloomed in the forest. It looked almost like a great tree now, and all the birds of passage, especially the storks and the swallows, bowed down before it. "That thing is taking on foreign airs now," said the thistles and the burdocks. "We never act like that here in this country." And the black forest snails spat at the plant. Then the swineherd came collecting thistles and other shrubs to burn them for their ashes. He tore up the heavenly plant by the roots and crammed it into his bag. "I can use that too," he said, and no sooner said than done. But for years, the king of that country had been troubled by a deep melancholy of spirit. He kept busy and laborious always, but it seemed to do him no good. They read books to him, deep and learned tomes, or the lightest and most trifling they could find, but nothing did any good. Then one of the world's wisest men, to whom they had applied for help, sent a messenger to explain to the king that there was but one sure remedy that would relieve and cure him. In a forest in the king's own country, there grows a plant of heavenly origin. Its appearance cannot be mistaken. And then the messenger brought out a drawing of the plant. It would be easy to recognize it. Its leaves are green winter and summer, so every evening put a fresh leaf on the king's forehead. His thoughts will then clear, and a beautiful dream will refresh and strengthen him. I think I took it up in my bundle and burned it to ashes a long time ago, said the swineherd. I just didn't know any better. You did not know any better, they all said. Ignorance, oh ignorance, how great you are. And those words the swineherd might well take to heart, for they were meant for him and no one else. Not a single leaf of that plant could be found. No one knew about the one leaf that lay in the coffin of the dead girl. And the king himself, in his terrible depression, wandered out to the spot in the woods. This is where the plant grew, he said. It shall be a sacred place. Then he had it surrounded by a golden railing, and a sentry was posted there by day and by night. The professor of botany wrote a thesis on the heavenly plant. As a reward, he was gilded all over, and that gilding suited him and his family very well indeed. As a matter of fact, that was the pleasantest part of the whole story, for the plant had disappeared. The king remained as melancholy and sad as before. But then he had always been that way, said the sentry. The phoenix bird in the garden of paradise, before sorrow had ever touched the wind. there grew a rose bush beneath the tree of knowledge. Its blossoms were pale as dawn and deep as flame. And in the heart of the first rose there stirred a trembling spark of life. From that sacred flower was born a bird, light as breath, radiant as the morning star. His wings caught the glow of the sun before the sun was named. His flight was like a silver lightning over the quiet dew of Eden. The angels smiled to see him. Rise, for his song was woven from the same harmony that bound the spheres together. A hymn without words, a melody that could make the rivers pause in their running. But then came the hour of disobedience, the fateful hand of Eve reaching toward the forbidden fruit. The air trembled. The garden fell silent. When the first bite was taken, the light of innocence was dimmed, and Adam and Eve were cast forth from the gates of paradise. As the flaming cherub drew his sword to guard the way, one single spark leapt from its edge and fell into the nest of that divine bird. The flame rose high. The leaves of the rose bush curled and darkened, and in a breath of fire, the bird was gone. Yet not all was lost. In the ashes of that holy blaze lay a single red egg, pulsing faintly with the memory of song. From it, trembling and glorious, rose a new creature, the phoenix, the only one of his kind. His feathers shimmered like molten gold. His eyes were the color of dawn, seen through tears. The legends tell that he flew eastward to Arabia, where in solitude he built his nest upon the frankincense tree. There once, in every 100 years, when the time of renewal came, he gathered spices and sweet bark around him, sang his last song to the dying sun, and surrendered himself again to the fire. Out of the crimson egg, left in his ashes, a new phoenix was always born, forever alone, yet forever reborn. I is the spirit of undying beauty, the flame that never tires. Around us, he flutters, still invisible, but present, swift, as light, clothed in every color of the heart. When a mother bends over her sleeping child, he perches unseen upon the pillow, fanning the infant's dreams with the light of heaven. When he passes through a humble room, the shadows brighten, the air grows warm, and even the violets upon the table breathe a sweeter fragrance. But the phoenix is not the bird of Arabia alone. He journeys through all the worlds of men. In the north, where the aurora shivers like living glass, he rides the green fires over Lapland's snow, leaving feathers of light upon the frozen sky. In Greenland's brief and tender summer, he hops among the yellow Arctic flowers, and his song mingles with the sighing of the ice beneath the copper mountains of Fablan, where miners kneel in the glow of their lamps, he descends as a dusty moth hovering over a worn hymn book, opened on a calloused knee. Along the sacred waters of the Ganges, he drifts upon a lotus leaf, and when a Hindu maiden looks into the current and beholds his glimmer, her eyes brighten like twin stars awakening at dusk. The phoenix bird, dost thou not know him? The bird of paradise, the immortal swan of song. Through every age he takes a different form. On the ancient stage of Thespis, he was the chattering raven that mocked and wept with the crowd, his black wings glistening with wine and sorrow. Over the frozen harp of Iceland, his beak red as embers swept the strings into song. On Shakespeare's shoulder, he rested in the guise of Odin's raven, whispering softly into the poet's ear the secret word, immortality. At the minstrel's feast in the halls of Wartburg, he fluttered unseen between goblet and lyre, leaving behind a spark in every verse. And dost thou not know him still? He sang for thee the song of freedom, the Marseillaise that set nations aflame, and thou kissed the pen that fell from his wing. He came to thee clothed in the radiance of paradise, but perhaps thou didst turn away, choosing instead the tinsel sparrow who chirped of trifles and fashion. Yet the phoenix waited still patient as dawn, for his song is eternal, and his silence divine. The bird of paradise, ever reborn, ever burning, dies in flame and is renewed in flame. His pitted likeness, framed in gold, adorns the halls of kings. But the living bird wanders unnoticed through the streets of the poor, alighting where there is love, hope, or faith enough to receive him. Men call him a myth, a dream, a fable of Arabia. But those who listen with their hearts have heard the faint rustle of his wings at dusk and felt the warmth of his passing in a world grown cold. For once, long ago, in the garden of paradise, beneath the tree of knowledge, and within the heart of the first rose, he was kissed by the breath of God. And in that holy moment, he was given his true name, not Phoenix, but poetry, the undying spirit that burns, perishes, and rises again in every age, in every soul that dares to dream.
you.